But first, another day in Melbourne, another solemn vow from Premier Jacinta Allan to get tough on crime, except this time she really means it. Apparently the 15th time's a charm. Let's walk through today's press conference, which began, shall we say, unconventionally.
I'm going to start this morning's press conference a little bit differently.
And I thought, oh good, she's finally going to take responsibility and apologise for turning Victoria into the set of Mad Max Beyond Bail Reform. Who was I kidding?
I'm going to start by reading an excerpt of one of the many emails I have received as Premier about the impact that violent youth crime has on its victims.
Well, how moving she's discovered victims. Now, call me cynical, but what I heard her read was less an email about youth crime and more a cry for help from someone living under Labor's soft on crime experiment. It was an email from a woman whose husband was stabbed 3 times when a young person armed with a knife that hadn't, for reasons we'll never be able to fathom, been placed in one of Jacinta Allan's machete bins. Here's the email's conclusion.
This is only my family's story. There are hundreds more. My husband should be working, enjoying life, not doing therapy exercises every hour. My son should be outside going for a run, not laying on the couch, frustrated and angry. I implore you to consider the gravity of this situation by placing yourself in my shoes.
To be sure, a heartbreaking letter, and one that deserves an apology, followed by a resignation letter attached to it. Because let's not forget, it was Labor that watered down bail laws, championed jail as a last resort, and insisted Melbourne was perfectly safe right up until the machetes started outnumbering my key cards. Now, instead of apologising, Jacinta Allan does that I feel your pain routine, which, to be fair, she's had plenty of practice at. It's quite shameless.
I today want to acknowledge, as Premier, that every one of these violent youth crimes has a victim.
Groundbreaking. The woman's practically a philosopher. This is why she's Premier, because she can discern that crimes produce victims. Amazing stuff. There was more.
A family that has had their life disrupted. A person that was shaken, a person who was hurt. And we are all horrified by these violent, brazen youth crimes and the devastating impact they have on its victims.
Well, I think Victorians are horrified by violent crime. The Premier? I suspect she's horrified by polling. But if the Premier is horrified by brazen, violent crimes, well, the horror must have only occurred to her last night, because she spent the best part of a month telling us how safe Melbourne is.
The CBD of Melbourne is safe, and I wish to reiterate that the Melbourne CBD is safe. Melbourne's CBD is safe.
Well, that aged like fine milk left on a St Kilda tram, didn't it?
Police tell us that this is a new type of crime that constantly requires new interventions.
I love how she pretends the crime crisis is new. She pretends all of this crime has just, come out of nowhere. But let's go with her assertion that Victoria is seeing a new type of crime, by which she means children acting up. The question then has to be asked, who let it get to this point, Premier?
There are no easy solutions here.
There are no easy solutions? But the machete bins, you mean to say they weren't the silver bullet after all? Months of collecting gardening tools from the suburbs and somehow crime persisted. Who could have predicted? Here's the actual easy solution. Enforce the law, deny bail to repeat offenders, and stop handing out sympathy cards instead of sentences. But when Jacinta Allan says there's no easy solutions, she means no solutions I'm willing to implement.
We know that children, as parents, we know that children need to face consequences when they do the wrong thing. And so consequences also must apply in the justice system.
I really like the way Jacinta Allan talks as a parent. It's the old I'm in this with you routine. Anyway, kids need consequences when they do the wrong thing. Has she just realised this, or does she think Victorians don't know? She's so keen to point out that kids need consequences Someone in her office has arranged for her to stand in front of a backdrop with the words "serious consequences" printed on it. It's like she believes that if she states the bleeding obvious, but with a serious face and a grave tone, we'll all be very impressed. So go ahead and be impressed.
There are too many victims and not enough consequences.
Well, let that sink in. I'd argue the Victorian Labor government has not had enough consequences. Maybe next year when the election comes due. So let's recap. She's told us that crimes have victims. She's told us that people are horrified at crime and assured us that despite all evidence to the contrary, her government is too. She's told us that she's a parent, and she's told us that kids need consequences. In other words, she's prattled on about absolutely nothing. And then finally, belatedly, she comes to her big idea.
Victoria will introduce adult time for violent crime, where the courts will treat children for these crimes like adults, where jail will be more likely and sentences will be longer.
That is such a great idea. Truly, it's a great idea. I can't believe Jacinta Allan came up with it. Except she didn't, did she? The Victorian Liberals suggested this long ago, and the Queensland LNP, well, they've actually done it. In Queensland, they call it adult crime, adult time. Jacinta Allan's gone with adult time, violent crime, so it's quite different and unique to her. Personally, I'd like to see actual time for any crime. I can make up rhyming slogans too. See, here's my problem. If the courts won't jail violent adults, what makes Jacinta Allan think they'll suddenly jail 14-year-olds? That's not policy, that's whiplash.
By making this shift to the adult court, it significantly increases the maximum lengths of sentences that will apply. In the Children's Court, the maximum sentencing length is 3 years for any offence. In the County Court, they can currently impose sentences of up to 25 years for aggravated home invasion or aggravated carjacking. Under our plan for adult time for violent crime, these offences will carry a life sentence.
It wasn't that long ago that the Victorian Labor government wanted the age of criminal responsibility raised to 14. Now they're boasting that they could impose lifetime jail terms on 14-year-olds.
We'll also be changing the priorities for the court to consider. Community safety must and will come first in all sentencing decisions, and we will also be removing the principle of jail as a last resort, because for some crimes it just shouldn't be.
Now, remember when Jacinta Allan was saying that Victoria is facing a new kind of brazen, violent youth crime? Well, the reason we've got this new kind of youth crime is because the Labor government insisted for so long on the principle of jail as a last resort. And for the Premier to have to announce that community safety must and will come first, well, that should have been a given, shouldn't it? The problem she will continue to have is the Victorian courts have taken it upon themselves to say that community safety might be best served by keeping youth offenders out of jail so they don't become hardened criminals. Until Jacinta Allan gets the law, the police and the courts all on the same page, nothing is going to change, including these insufferable press conferences where she announces new tough-on-crime policies only to repeat it all again a few weeks hence.
This is the following list of the brazen and violent crimes that will be subject to adult time for violent crime. Aggravated home invasion, intentionally causing injury in circumstances of gross violence, including machete crimes, recklessly causing injury in circumstances of gross violence, aggravated carjacking, aggravated burglary, serious and repeated, armed robbery, serious and repeated.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Is she describing the list of crimes subject to the new laws, or is she describing Tuesday on a Melbourne morning?
We will be introducing a bill to the Parliament to bring about adult time for violent crime before the end of this parliamentary year. I want adult time for violent crime to commence as soon as possible.
Yeah, didn't Jacinta Allan promise last year that she would introduce a bill to the Victorian Parliament to ban the wearing of face masks at protests, only now to have a watered-down version of that? So forgive me if I don't pop the champagne just yet. And you'll put it before the Parliament this year, right? So when will it come into effect?
We must send a very clear message and must indeed deliver the serious consequences that need to come as a result from people who commit these violent crimes. And it's from listening to victims of these horrific attacks that I'm determined to do everything I can to keep them and our community safe.
I'm determined. I'll do everything I can. Must deliver. So then a journalist asked the Victorian Premier whether this legislation to be brought to Parliament by the end of the year had been written yet. And her answer? Not yet. Now, I'd say something on that, but whatever I say, I don't think it'll be better than Liberal leader Brad Batten's response.
This is the absolute highlight of the absolute this government feeds the community. I'm sorry, you can't come out with a media release and not have the legislation written to protect Victorians. That is an absolute joke.
He's right, it's a joke. Jacinta Allan's tough-on-crime legislation is like her economic policy, imaginary and self-congratulatory. In other words, it's business as usual in Victoria.